My hands, gnarled with the stories of decades, still remember the biting cold of that night. It wasn't the kind of cold that merely chills the skin. It was the kind that seeped into your bones, whispering of emptiness and despair. I was barely a woman then, my body aching from relentless labor, my spirit flickering like a dying flame in the harsh wind. The sprawling mansion, a monument to my father's wealth and cruelty, loomed behind me, its windows like cold, judging eyes in the inky blackness. I clutched a threadbare shawl tighter around my shivering frame, the flimsy fabric offering little solace against the Lahore winter, a winter that mirrored the chill in my very soul. The sound of their laughter, muffled yet distinct, drifted from the warmth of the drawing room, a stark contrast to my shivering solitude. My siblings, the children of his true wife, were gathered around a roaring fire, their faces glowing with contentment, their voices light with carefree joy. I, on the other hand, was sent out into the biting cold, ordered to fetch some obscure medicinal herbs from the far reaches of the garden, a task designed not for its necessity, but for its sheer inconvenience, another cruel reminder of my place. My stomach growled, a familiar ache that had been my constant companion since childhood, a gnawing emptiness that no amount of stale bread could ever truly satisfy. As I navigated the darkened pathways, my bare feet stinging on the frost-kissed earth, a sudden sharp pain lanced through my ankle. I stumbled, crying out, a gasp swallowed by the vast, uncaring night. The herbs scattered, their precious, delicate leaves lost in the shadows. Panic, cold and sharp, gripped me. I knew what this meant. I knew the fury that awaited me, the icy words, the contemptuous glances, perhaps even a lash from the whip my father sometimes used on the household staff, a threat that hung heavy in the air, though I had never personally felt its sting. I crawled on my hands and knees, frantically searching for the scattered herbs, my fingers numb with cold and fear. Each breath was a visible cloud in the frigid air, each heartbeat a frantic drum against my ribs. I could hear them still, their laughter like a mocking chorus, reminding me of the warmth and security that were so cruelly denied to me. A desperate prayer, a silent plea for mercy, formed on my lips, but it felt hollow, unanswered, swallowed by the vast indifference of the night. Suddenly a shadow fell over me, large and imposing. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was him, my father, his face a mask of cold fury, illuminated by the faint glow of the mansion lights. His eyes, usually distant and cold, now burned with a chilling anger, his jaw clenched tight. I scrambled to my feet, my injured ankle screaming in protest, clutching the few herbs I had managed to salvage, my body trembling uncontrollably. What is this incompetence? His voice boomed, cutting through the stillness of the night, sharp and unforgiving. You can't even perform a simple task without making a mess, can you? You are useless, a burden on this household, fit for nothing but charity. Each word was a lash, stinging more than any physical blow, chipping away at the last vestiges of my already fragile self-worth. My eyes, brimming with unshed tears, dared not meet his. His wife, my mother, appeared beside him, her silken robes rustling in the cold, her face a picture of disdain. See, I told you, she sneered, her voice like chipped ice. She is nothing but a clumsy, ungrateful wretch. We should have sent her away years ago, left her to starve on the streets where she belongs. She brings shame upon our family, a constant reminder of circumstances. Her words, veiled yet venomous, struck a deeper chord, a chilling reminder of some unspoken secret. My father's hand shot out, not to strike, but to grab my arm with a force that made me whimper. He dragged me back towards the mansion, his grip like iron, pulling me through the cold. My injured ankle protested with every step, sending shooting pains up my leg, but I dared not cry out again. Their words echoed in my ears, a cacophony of condemnation, a constant reminder of my perceived worthlessness. They were not just scolding me. They were stripping me bare, exposing the raw, aching wound of my existence. As we reached the brightly lit entrance, the warm, inviting glow of the drawing room seemed to mock my shivering form. He shoved me towards the back door, towards the dark, cold servants' quarters, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. Go, clean yourself up and remember your place. You will not soil our presence with your incompetence. His voice was laced with an almost unimaginable contempt, a disgust that made my stomach churn. I stumbled through the dark corridors, tears finally spilling down my cheeks, hot and bitter against my frozen skin. My ankle throbbed, a constant, dull ache, but the pain in my heart was far greater. Their words, useless, burden, shame, replayed in my mind, each one a fresh wound. I was not just hungry. I was famished for kindness, for acceptance, for a single moment of genuine human connection. The contrast between their warmth and my cold, dark reality was a brutal, unbearable truth. I huddled in my meager cot, shivering uncontrollably, the sounds of their celebration still faintly audible through the thick walls. The meager blanket offered little warmth against the pervasive cold, but I pulled it tighter around myself, a desperate attempt to find solace. The events of the night replayed in my mind, each word, each glance, etching itself deeper into my memory. It was then, in the depths of my despair, that a tiny ember of defiance began to glow within me, a flicker of something new and powerful. This wasn't just about hunger anymore, or about being an unloved child. This was about something deeper, something far more sinister. Circumstances, his wife had said, her voice dripping with venom. What circumstances? What secret did they hold that made them treat me with such profound cruelty? The question gnawed at me, igniting a hunger not for food, but for truth. I was tired of being a shadow, tired of being dismissed, tired of being less than human. That night, as the Lahore winter howled outside, a new kind of cold settled in my heart. It was the cold of determination, the icy resolve of a spirit pushed to its absolute breaking point. I made a silent vow to myself, a whispered promise in the darkness. I would not just survive, I would uncover every truth, every lie, and I would make them pay for every single moment of my suffering. My quiet preparation, born out of desperation, was about to begin, and they, in their arrogance, would never see it coming. My father, a man of imposing stature and even more imposing will, often observed me with an unnerving detachment, his eyes cold and unyielding. It was as if my very existence was a stain on his perfectly curated life, a constant reminder of something he wished to erase. While his legitimate children were adorned in fine silks and tutored by the best scholars, I was clad in faded, patched garments, relegated to the shadows of the servants' quarters. My days were an endless cycle of backbreaking chores, scrubbing floors until my knees ached, washing mountains of clothes until my hands bled, serving meals I was rarely allowed to taste. His wife, a woman of icy disdain, would frequently remind me of my place, her voice dripping with venom. She called me the little servant, the burden, often adding cruel remarks about my supposed incompetence, even though I worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk. I learned to become invisible, to move through the sprawling house like a ghost, avoiding direct eye contact, my voice a whisper. The worst was the nights, after the other children were tucked into their warm beds, their laughter echoing through the halls. I would lie on the cold floor of the servants' quarters, listening to the muffled sounds of their privileged lives, the scent of their untouched feasts wafting under the door, a tormenting aroma that highlighted my constant hunger. The gaslighting was insidious, a slow erosion of my self-worth. Whenever I dared to ask for anything, a book, a warmer blanket, even a moment of rest, I was met with icy contempt. They would tell me I was ungrateful, that I was lucky to have a roof over my head, effectively twisting my desperate pleas into perceived character flaws. They painted me as demanding, lazy despite my tireless work, systematically convincing me that my suffering was somehow my own fault, a deserved punishment for a transgression I couldn't comprehend. The abandonment was complete, not just physical but emotional, a deep festering wound that defined my early existence. I recall a particularly brutal instance years before, when a small ornate porcelain doll, belonging to my father's youngest daughter, was accidentally broken. It was an antique, incredibly valuable, and the daughter, spoiled and prone to tantrums, wailed inconsolably. Despite my fervent denials, my father's wife immediately accused me, her eyes alight with a cold, triumphant cruelty. "You clumsy oaf!" she shrieked. "You are incapable of anything but destruction." My father, standing by impassively, merely nodded, his silence a searing condemnation. I was locked in a small windowless storage room for 2 days, given only stale bread and a single cup of water as punishment. The darkness was absolute, the silence punctuated only by the frantic beat of my own terrified heart. The hunger became a burning torment, far worse than any physical pain, but it was the profound injustice, the casual dismissal of my truth, that truly etched itself into my soul. It was in that suffocating darkness that a seed of fierce rebellion began to sprout, a silent promise that one day, I would make them see the truth, no matter the cost. From that moment on, every interaction, every observation, every overheard whisper became a potential clue, a piece of a puzzle I was desperately trying to solve. I started paying closer attention to the fleeting, almost imperceptible glances exchanged between my father and the cook, an elderly woman named Fatima, glances that held a strange mix of pity and guilt. Fatima, unlike the others, sometimes left me a small portion of food when she thought no one was looking, a small act of kindness that shone like a beacon in the darkness, a tiny flame of humanity in my otherwise desolate world. One day, while polishing my father's study, a task I loathed due to the sheer opulence of his possessions, my hand brushed against a loose floorboard near his massive ornate desk. Curiosity, a dangerous companion in my world, compelled me to investigate further. Beneath it, tucked away, was a small, intricately carved wooden box, its surface smooth and cool beneath my trembling fingers. My heart pounded against my ribs as I slowly opened it, revealing not jewels or money, but a collection of old letters and official documents, their paper yellowed with age. I quickly scanned them, my limited education making some of the legal jargon difficult to decipher, but one phrase, repeated in several letters, struck me like a bolt of lightning: the illegitimate child. The words swam before my eyes, blurring the lines of my reality, shaking the very foundations of what I believed to be true. Illegitimate? Was I not my father's child, born of his wife? The shock was quickly followed by a cold, calculating resolve, a clarity that cut through the fog of my lifelong confusion. I knew I couldn't risk being caught, so I meticulously memorized what I could, noting names, dates, and recurring themes that seemed to speak of a clandestine arrangement, a hidden secret. I realized then that I wasn't just an unloved child. I was a secret, a carefully hidden stain on their pristine family lineage, a living testament to a deception they desperately wanted to keep buried. From that moment, my observation skills, honed by years of trying to anticipate the unpredictable whims of my oppressors, sharpened even further, becoming a crucial tool in my silent rebellion. I began to pay closer attention to the subtle shifts in their tones, the fleeting expressions on their faces, the nuances of their conversations. I started to understand that their sustained cruelty wasn't just personal. It was a deliberate strategy to keep me in my place, to ensure I remained a forgotten shadow, unseen and unheard. I also began to cultivate a silent network, a clandestine alliance born of necessity. Fatima, the cook, became my unwitting confidant, her small acts of kindness a lifeline. Through seemingly innocuous questions, I extracted fragments of information about my father's past, his intricate business dealings, his true character, often disguised as innocent curiosity about the household. Fatima spoke of a younger, more vivacious Fatima, a maid who had worked for the family years ago, before I was born, her eyes holding a knowing sadness. The pieces of the puzzle, though fragmented and scattered, slowly began to connect, forming a terrifying, yet strangely liberating picture. I realized that the medical tricks I'd learned from observing the family physician during his visits, how to take a pulse, recognize symptoms of common ailments, even rudimentary first aid, could be valuable, a skill set I never imagined possessing. The legal terms I'd overheard in hushed conversations or glimpsed in those hidden documents started to form a vague understanding of the intricate web of laws that governed their world, a system I was now determined to understand and manipulate. These seemingly insignificant details, once absorbed out of sheer survival instinct, were now becoming the building blocks of a plan I didn't yet fully comprehend, but one that simmered beneath the surface of my consciousness, a quiet but potent force. I made a silent vow to myself, etched into the very core of my being. I would not just survive this torment, I would uncover every truth, every lie, and I would make them pay for every single moment of my suffering, every tear, every pang of hunger, every dehumanizing glance. My quiet preparation was not just about gathering information. It was about reclaiming my mind, my identity, piece by agonizing piece, a long and arduous process of self-liberation. The chill of that night, the humiliation, the gnawing hunger, they didn't break me. Instead, they forged something new within me, a hard, unyielding resolve. My secret investigations began subtly, almost imperceptibly, A dance of shadows and whispers in the vast, unsuspecting mansion. I moved through the house with a newfound purpose, my eyes and ears open to every detail, every hushed conversation, every seemingly insignificant scrap of paper. My father, with his booming voice and an ego as sprawling as his estate, never noticed. He was too consumed by his own grandeur, too certain of his unchallenged dominion. He saw a silent, subservient girl. He never saw the fire kindling in her eyes. My first real break came not with a bang, but with a whisper, a casual comment from a visiting solicitor about the old man's peculiarities. This was a reference to my paternal grandfather, a man I barely remembered, a distant, severe figure. This solicitor, a nervous, sweating man who clearly disliked my father, mentioned an unusual clause in my grandfather's will, something about all issue, legitimate or otherwise. The words hung in the air, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor in my carefully constructed world. My father, usually so composed, had stiffened, his eyes narrowing at the solicitor's indiscretion. He quickly changed the subject, but the seed was planted. That night my mind raced. All issue, legitimate or otherwise. What did that mean for me? The fragmented memories of the hidden documents in the wooden box resurfaced with startling clarity. I had dismissed them then as confusing legal jargon, but now a chilling possibility began to form. Could I be that otherwise? Could my father have been legally bound to provide for me, and yet chosen to starve and neglect me instead? The thought was a searing indictment, a betrayal far deeper than simple neglect. It transformed my suffering from unfortunate circumstance into a calculated act of malice. My observations intensified. I became a ghost in the house, moving with silent efficiency, my senses acutely attuned. I noticed my father's increasingly frequent, hushed conversations with his financial advisor, a man named Mr. Rahim. Their discussions often revolved around asset protection and avoiding undue liabilities. I started discreetly gathering any papers left unattended in the study, even seemingly innocuous ones like old invoices or business letters. I taught myself to read and write more proficiently by painstakingly deciphering old newspapers and discarded ledgers from the pantry. My knowledge was patchy, but it was growing, each new word a small victory. I also began to cultivate a fragile alliance with Fatima, the cook. She was an old woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, but her eyes held a profound sadness when they met mine. I approached her cautiously, not with questions about my past, but with quiet acts of kindness, helping her chop vegetables, fetching water, offering to mend her worn shawl. Slowly, trust began to build. One evening, as we sat peeling potatoes, I casually asked about the old days, about the household before I was born. Fatima's voice, usually gruff, softened. She spoke of a young, beautiful maid also named Fatima, who had worked for my father's family years ago, before his marriage. My heart leaped. This was the connection, the missing piece of the puzzle. The cook was not the Fatima from the documents. She was a later employee, but she knew the stories. She spoke of the original Fatima's sudden disappearance, whispered about a scandal that the family had quickly hushed up. My father, she hinted, had been very different before his marriage, more jovial, less rigid. Then he married her. The cook muttered, a flicker of disdain in her eyes, referring to my mother, his formidable wife. And everything changed. The house became cold. People changed. It wasn't direct confirmation, but it was enough. The narrative was becoming clearer. I was the child of a forbidden liaison, forced upon my father by a legal obligation, and hidden away, treated as a perpetual punishment. My quiet preparation was no longer just about survival. It was about meticulously gathering the ammunition for a silent war. Every overheard word, every retrieved document, every memory catalogued, was a nail hammered into the coffin of their lies. As the truth began to solidify in my mind, their arrogance seemed to swell, their cruelty becoming almost unbearable. My father, buoyed by a significant new business deal, hosted lavish parties, parading his legitimate children before Lahore's elite. He would make grand pronouncements about his philanthropic endeavors, his commitment to family values, his blessings from God. All while I, the silent, invisible girl, served refreshments, my face a mask of practiced neutrality, my stomach churning with the bitter irony of it all. His wife, ever the polished manipulator, would offer thinly veiled insults, disguised as concern. "Poor girl, she seems so frail," she'd say to guests observing my thin frame. "We do try to nourish her, but some people simply have a delicate constitution." Or, "She's not quite as quick-witted as our own children, bless her heart, but she tries." Her words were designed to cement my status as a charity case, a simple, slow-witted servant, incapable of understanding the intricate web of deceit she and my father had spun. Oh, the delicious irony! They believed I was oblivious, a simple-minded girl, incapable of understanding the intricate web of deceit they had spun around me. They believed their secret was safe, buried deep beneath layers of respectability and carefully constructed lies. I let them believe it. I met their condescension with a serene, almost detached smile, a silent acknowledgement that I was indeed their servant, their burden, just as they wished. I absorbed every detail, every subtle nuance of their lives. I listened to their conversations, noting their vulnerabilities, their fears, their hidden desires. I observed their interactions with others, understanding the delicate balance of alliances and animosities within their social circle. My mind, once consumed by the desperate need for sustenance, was now a meticulously organized archive of their transgressions, a library of their downfall. The dramatic irony was palpable. They would openly discuss their business dealings, their social engagements, even their personal grievances, in my presence, never suspecting that the maid's child was actually a silent, calculating observer, collecting evidence that would one day unravel their carefully constructed world. When they would occasionally offer me a meager morsel of food, a condescending gesture of charity, I would smile demurely, my eyes holding a secret understanding, a quiet knowledge that they were unknowingly feeding the very force that would bring about their downfall. Sometimes a kind-hearted distant relative or a sympathetic house staff member would express concern for my well-being, offering a fleeting moment of warmth. They would question my father's harshness, his wife's coldness, perhaps suggesting that I deserved better. They too were unknowingly becoming unwitting allies in my silent rebellion. They would try to protect me, to intervene on my behalf, believing I was simply a victim, fragile and helpless. They didn't know that I was the one protecting them, gathering the tools to dismantle the very system that oppressed us all. The tension for me was a slow burn, a simmering anticipation. Every condescending word, every dismissive glance, every act of deliberate cruelty only added fuel to the fire of my resolve. I knew that one day their smug smiles would falter, their confident voices would tremble, and they would finally see the true power of the girl they had so cruelly underestimated. I was no longer just surviving, I was preparing meticulously and relentlessly for the moment I would reclaim my name, my dignity, and exact a justice so profound it would echo through generations. Please pause here and subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying this story. Your support helps me share more tales of resilience and unexpected justice. My first strike was not a thunderous declaration, but a whisper, a subtle ripple in the seemingly calm waters of their privileged existence. It was meticulously planned, executed with the precision of a seasoned strategist, and designed to leave them bewildered and without a clear target. It began with the seemingly innocuous act of sending anonymous letters. Not to them directly, no, that would be too obvious. Instead, I carefully researched their business rivals, their social adversaries, even their disgruntled former employees, gleaning names and addresses from discarded mail and overheard conversations. I meticulously gathered snippets of information I had gleaned over the years: a shady land deal, a whispered rumor of a corrupt official paid off, an overlooked clause in a major contract, an affair my father was conducting with a high-profile socialite. I compiled these fragmented pieces of information, weaving them into a narrative of suspicion, a story that, while not entirely complete, contained enough verifiable truths to ignite doubt and suspicion. The letters were sent from untraceable post offices in distant towns, their contents carefully worded to avoid direct accusation, but to subtly hint at impropriety, to plant seeds of unease in the minds of those who could cause them the most damage. I used my nascent understanding of legal terminology, gleaned from those hidden documents, to phrase certain sentences with a veneer of legal authority, making the anonymous tips seem legitimate and credible. The initial impact was subtle, almost imperceptible. I noticed a shift in my father's demeanor. He became more agitated, his usual bravado replaced by a nervous energy. He would spend hours on the phone, his voice hushed, his brow furrowed in frustration, pacing the study late into the night. His wife, usually so composed, seemed more on edge, her sharp words laced with a new undercurrent of anxiety, her temper flaring at the slightest provocation. The first real tremor came when I overheard him shouting into the telephone about a sudden audit. His voice strained with barely contained fury. Then came the news of a crucial business deal, one he had been boasting about for months, suddenly falling through. The whispers in the household shifted from casual gossip to worried speculation. The family lawyer, a frequent visitor, now seemed to be a constant presence, his face grim, his conversations with my father lengthy and strained, often involving hushed references to irregularities. I would observe them from a distance, my heart a quiet drumbeat of satisfaction. They were reeling, confused, unable to pinpoint the source of their sudden misfortunes. They suspected rivals, jealous colleagues, even a rogue employee. But the idea that the silent, starving maid's child could be orchestrating their downfall was simply beyond their comprehension. They were so caught up in their own perceived importance, their own labyrinth of lies, that they couldn't see the tiny, insignificant thread I had begun to tug, a thread that was slowly, imperceptibly, unraveling the very fabric of their carefully constructed lives. Then came the confrontation. It was late one evening. I was serving dinner, my face impassive as I placed a steaming platter before them. My father, red-faced and agitated from a long day of crisis management, suddenly slammed his fist on the table, making the fine china clatter. "This is unbearable," he roared, his eyes darting wildly. "Someone is trying to sabotage me. My business, my reputation, everything is under attack." His wife, her face pale, nodded grimly. "It's someone close, I tell you. Someone who knows too much." My siblings looked on, bewildered and frightened by their parents' unusual distress. My father's gaze, wild and desperate, suddenly landed on me. For a moment I thought he had seen through my facade, that he somehow suspected. My breath hitched. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion, then dismissiveness. "You!" he bellowed, pointing a finger at me. "Have you seen anything? Heard anything? Any strange visitors? Any unusual activity?" His tone was accusatory, as if my very presence invited trouble. I met his gaze directly for the first time in years, my heart pounding, but my voice remained steady, a practiced whisper. "No, sir. Nothing out of the ordinary." He scoffed, turning away with a dismissive wave of his hand. Useless as always. But something had shifted in that moment. My direct, unflinching gaze, however brief, had rattled him, even if he couldn't articulate why. He had looked into my eyes, and for a fleeting second, he had seen something more than just a servant. It was a minuscule victory, but it filled me with a quiet, fierce satisfaction. They were scared. They were confused. And I, the invisible girl, knew exactly what was happening, and the knowledge fueled the growing fire within me. Each crisis that erupted in their privileged lives, each moment of their growing panic, was a testament to my unseen hand, a silent victory in a war they didn't even know they were fighting. I was no longer just surviving, I was preparing meticulously and relentlessly for the moment I would reclaim my name, my dignity, and exact a justice so profound it would echo through generations. The tension in the mansion became a palpable thing, thick and suffocating like the Lahore summer air before a storm. My father, once a man of unshakable composure, now paced constantly, his booming voice reduced to hushed, frantic whispers on the telephone. His face, usually ruddy with self-importance, was now a sickly gray, etched with lines of worry and fear. His wife, my mother, a woman who thrived on control, was visibly unraveling, her carefully constructed facade of icy disdain cracking under the relentless pressure. They were caught in a web of their own making, and I, the silent weaver, watched their desperate struggles with a quiet, unwavering satisfaction. The anonymous whispers I had so carefully planted had blossomed into a full-blown media frenzy. The local newspapers, once fawning over my father's supposed philanthropy, now ran headlines hinting at financial impropriety and dark secrets. Journalists, like vultures sensing carrion, circled the mansion, their cameras flashing, their questions sharp and intrusive. The very walls that had once protected their lies now seemed to echo with their impending doom. My father's carefully constructed world was crumbling, brick by painstaking brick, and the foundations of his reputation were turning to dust. It was during this chaotic period that I decided it was time for the next decisive step. The initial anonymous tips had been merely the first brushstrokes of a much larger, more intricate painting. Now it was time to reveal the masterpiece, a truth so devastating it would shatter their lives beyond repair. I knew that public shame, coupled with inevitable legal repercussions, would be the most potent weapon against them, far more effective than any direct confrontation. I had seen how they cherished their public image, how they valued their social standing above all else. Stripping that away would be their ultimate demise. My goal was not just to expose his financial dealings, but to reveal the monstrous truth of my existence, that I, his own flesh and blood, had been starved and enslaved within his opulent home. The journalist I had chosen, Ms. Amara Khan, was known for her tenacity and her unwavering commitment to exposing corruption and injustice, especially concerning the vulnerable. I had observed her work for months, reading every article, admiring her courage. I knew she would be the perfect vessel for my truth. I meticulously curated a package of irrefutable evidence, gathered over years of silent observation and desperate scavenging. It included copies of bank statements showing illegal transactions and funds siphoned off for illicit purposes, damning proof of his financial malfeasance. There were signed affidavits from former employees, carefully obtained through discreet means, detailing unethical business practices, the bribing of officials, and the systematic exploitation of their workers. And crucially, there was the tangible proof of my own suffering, a series of veiled, yet undeniably incriminating notes from my father to his solicitor regarding the matter of the child, the documents I had first glimpsed in the hidden compartment. These notes discussed arrangements for my continued upkeep, always phrased in terms of a burden, a necessary evil to fulfill the terms of his father's will, yet never once mentioning my well-being or education. I also included photographic evidence I had secretly taken over the years using an old, discarded camera I had bartered for from a sympathetic servant. These were not just snapshots, they were stark, haunting images of the squalid conditions I had endured, my threadbare clothes, the meager portions of food, the desperate look in my own young eyes. I even included a blurred image of the corner of the legal document from my father's coat, the one that had first ignited the fire within me, a partial glimpse of the damning clause from my grandfather's will mandating his support for all his issue, legitimate or otherwise. These were not just accusations, they were undeniable facts, meticulously gathered and presented in a way that left no room for doubt, a silent scream frozen in time. The package was sent via a series of convoluted international postal services, routed through multiple countries, ensuring its anonymity and untraceability. I used a discreet, unmarked envelope, sealing it with a small, unidentifiable wax seal. The final touch was the timing. I ensured the package would arrive at Ms. Khan's office just as the scrutiny around my father reached its peak, creating a perfect storm of public interest and legal pressure. The trap was closing, not with a sudden snap, but with the slow, inexorable squeeze of a python, every coil tightening until escape was impossible. I visualized the moment. The headlines, the public outrage, the legal proceedings that would strip them of their wealth, their power, and their carefully constructed lies. I saw their faces contorted in disbelief, their arrogance replaced by terror. The anticipation was a tangible thing, a constant hum beneath my skin, a quiet drumbeat of impending justice. I knew they would be desperate, lashing out, attempting to deflect blame, to destroy evidence, to discredit anyone who dared to speak against them. But I had anticipated every move, every possible counterattack. The evidence was overwhelming, the narrative clear, and the public, once swayed by their facade of respectability, would turn on them with the ferocity of a betrayed lover. This was not just about revenge. It was about exposing the truth, about ensuring that no other child would suffer the same fate, would be rendered invisible for the convenience of others. The years of hunger, the silent tears, the aching loneliness, all of it would culminate in this single, shattering moment of revelation. The day the story broke felt like the ground shifting beneath my feet, not in a destructive tremor, but in a profound earth-shattering realignment. The headlines screamed, not just about my father's financial improprieties, but about the deeply unsettling personal scandal that intertwined with his public life. The investigative journalist, Ms. Amara Khan, with ruthless efficiency, had pieced together the evidence, connecting the dots between the hidden documents, the former employees' testimonies, and the haunting photographic evidence of my suffering. Her article splashed across the front page of every major newspaper and broadcast on every news channel, detailed how my father, a man celebrated for his philanthropy and business acumen, had secretly maintained an illegitimate child, born to a former maid, whom he had forced into a life of servitude within his own home. It exposed his callous disregard for my well-being, the systematic neglect, and the deliberate starvation. It spoke of the twisted irony of a man who publicly championed children's welfare, while simultaneously starving his own flesh and blood. But the real twist, the truly devastating blow that would shatter his world completely, came not just from the exposure of my hidden identity, but from the revelation of the damning clause in his father's will. The article highlighted that my father had not merely neglected me out of indifference. He had actively deprived me of a rightful inheritance, turning his legal obligation to provide for all his issue into an insidious form of punishment. He had not just let me starve. He had systematically suppressed my existence, all to maintain his image and ensure no one would ever suspect the secret he harbored. The truth was laid bare. He was forced to keep me due to the will, but he chose to make my life a living hell. His weakness, the fear of losing his inheritance, was indeed a mask for his true, insidious cruelty. The antagonist's downfall was swift and absolute. The public outrage was immediate and ferocious. His business partners severed ties, his social standing crumbled, and legal proceedings were initiated on multiple fronts: fraud, child neglect, and emotional abuse. His legitimate children, suddenly confronted with the grotesque reality of their father's duplicity, were shunned, their own lives tainted by his monstrous secret, their former friends turning away in disgust. The smug look on my father's face, the one I had endured for so long, finally crumbled, replaced by a mixture of shock, fury, and utter despair. He realized, too late, that the quiet, unassuming girl he had starved and humiliated was the architect of his ruin. I heard snippets of his desperate cries, his frantic attempts to deny, to deflect, but the evidence was overwhelming, the public condemnation relentless. He was trapped, not by a physical cage, but by the irrefutable truth of his own monstrous actions, a truth that had been patiently cultivated over decades. Then came the moment of direct confrontation, not in a physical fight, but in a battle of souls. It happened in the crowded courtroom, during one of the preliminary hearings. I had purposefully positioned myself in the public gallery, a silent figure in the back row, dressed simply, my face serene, my eyes holding a depth of knowledge that spoke volumes. He was on the stand, pale and trembling, attempting to stammer out denials under the prosecutor's relentless questioning. His eyes, darting frantically around the room, suddenly locked onto mine. In that fleeting instant across the crowded courtroom, our gazes met. His eyes, once so cold and dismissive, now widened with a terrible recognition. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The silent, unseen ghost he had tormented for a lifetime was not a ghost at all, but a living, breathing woman, a force of nature he had foolishly underestimated. I saw the flicker of raw terror in his eyes, a dawning comprehension of the depths of my meticulously planned vengeance. He knew then that I was not just a victim but an architect of his destruction. His face contorted, a mixture of disbelief and utter despair, and he visibly swayed on the stand. It was a silent conversation, a profound exchange of power, a culmination of all the years of suffering and silent plotting. His downfall was complete, sealed by the very truth he had tried so desperately to bury. The ghost he had tried to bury had finally risen, not for haunting but for justice. The public disgrace, the legal ramifications, and the sheer weight of his unraveling world consumed my father. He faded from the public eye, his name synonymous with deceit and cruelty. His wealth, once a symbol of his power, was stripped away, some of it rightfully allocated to me through the courts, a small but significant acknowledgement of the years of suffering. His wife, abandoned by her crumbling world, retreated into a bitter isolation, her icy demeanor finally cracking under the immense pressure of public scorn. His other children, once so privileged, found their lives irrevocably altered, their family name forever stained by the monstrous revelations. As for me, the immediate aftermath was not a burst of triumphant celebration, but a profound sense of quiet relief, a deep exhalation after a lifetime of holding my breath. I stood among the ashes of their shattered lives, not with malice, but with a profound sense of peace. The knot of anger and resentment that had tightened in my stomach for so long finally began to loosen. The courtroom felt surreal, a blur of legal jargon and flashing cameras. But through it all, there was a sense of vindication, a recognition of my truth that had been denied for so long. The official documents finally recognizing me as a legal heir were more than just papers. They were a validation of my existence, a tangible proof that I was not just the maid's child, but a human being with rights and a rightful place in the world. I remember receiving a letter, a simple handwritten note from Ms. Amara Khan, the investigative journalist, expressing her profound admiration for my courage and resilience. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it resonated deeply, a quiet acknowledgement of the arduous journey I had undertaken. The world outside the court shifted around me. The whispers were no longer of speculation or pity, but of awe and respect. My name, once synonymous with anonymity, was now spoken with reverence. People who had once looked through me, or with pity, now regarded me with respect, even reverence, some approaching me cautiously to offer words of encouragement or a simple empathetic nod. I found myself in a moment of profound stillness. I walked through the quiet streets of Lahore, the familiar sounds of the city a balm to my soul. The air felt cleaner, the sunlight brighter, as if a perpetual cloud had lifted from my life. The phantom pangs of hunger still occasionally surfaced, a reminder of the past, but they no longer held the same power. They were now just echoes, not a present reality, fading into the background of my newfound freedom. I found a small old photograph of Fatima, the cook, tucked away in my belongings. Her face, etched with kindness, brought a gentle smile to my lips. She had been my unwitting ally, her small acts of defiance a lifeline in the darkness, a beacon of human warmth. I thought of the long, silent nights, the tears shed in solitude, the desperation that had once consumed me. And now there was peace. Not a boisterous, triumphant joy, but a deep, quiet satisfaction that justice, though delayed, had finally arrived. My life, once defined by the shadows of another's cruelty, was now my own, bathed in the gentle light of a hard-won truth. The years of suffering had not been in vain. They had forged a woman who understood the depths of human cruelty, but also the enduring power of her own spirit. I was not just free, I was whole. The legal battles, though emotionally draining, concluded with a decisive victory. The courts acknowledged the egregious neglect and abuse I had endured, awarding me a significant portion of my father's assets. It was a fraction of what he had hoarded, certainly, but it was enough to secure my future. Enough to build a life free from the chilling grip of hunger and fear. The media, having feasted on the scandal, now shifted its focus to my story of survival and resilience. My face, once hidden in the shadows, was now frequently featured in newspapers and on television, a testament to the undeniable power of truth. The very city that had once turned a blind eye to my suffering now watched my story unfold with a mixture of shock and profound respect. The community, initially bewildered by the revelations, began to shift its perspective dramatically. The whispers changed, no longer of condemnation for my father, but of awe and admiration for my strength. People who had once looked through me, or with pity, now regarded me with genuine respect, even reverence. Neighbors, once distant, now approached me with warmth, offering words of support and encouragement. I remember one elderly woman, a distant relative of my father's, who had always treated me with cold indifference. She approached me after a court hearing, her eyes filled with tears, and offered a sincere apology, admitting her profound regret for not seeing my suffering earlier, for not intervening. It was a small gesture, but it resonated deeply, a testament to the slow, arduous process of changing hearts and minds, of peeling back the layers of societal blindness. With the financial resources finally at my disposal, I embarked on a journey of healing and profound self-discovery. The very first step was to acquire the small house I now call home, a place of peace and security that I had chosen myself, a home I could build with my own hands and hard-won freedom. It was a tangible symbol of my autonomy, a stark contrast to the sprawling, opulent prison I had once inhabited. Every nail hammered, every brushstroke of paint, was an act of defiance, a reclaiming of my right to exist, to thrive. The scent of fresh paint and new wood filled my lungs, replacing the stale, airless smell of my past. I dedicated myself to education, a thirst for knowledge that had been denied to me for so long. I enrolled in courses, devouring books voraciously, eager to fill the vast gaps in my understanding of the world. I studied law, not just its dry principles but its profound implications, understanding the very system that had both oppressed and ultimately liberated me. I learned about social justice, about the rights of the vulnerable, about the immense power of advocacy. The knowledge I gained was not just for myself. It was for others who might be trapped in similar circumstances, silent victims in a world that often ignores the cries of the powerless. I understood now that knowledge was a weapon, and I intended to wield it. I used a significant portion of my resources to establish a foundation, quietly, without fanfare, dedicated to supporting neglected and abused children, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. It was my way of transforming my pain into purpose, of ensuring that my suffering was not in vain. The foundation provided shelter, education, and legal aid, offering a lifeline to those who had once been as invisible and unheard as I was. We created safe houses, funded scholarships, and provided legal representation for children and families battling systemic injustices. I worked tirelessly, dedicating my time and energy to this cause, finding immense satisfaction in every child whose life I could touch, every silent voice I could amplify, every small victory against the vast darkness of neglect. My world, once small and suffocating, expanded exponentially. I connected with other advocates, shared my story, and became a quiet, yet powerful voice for change. I found a new sense of belonging, not in the confines of a family that had disowned me, but within a community of like-minded individuals who shared my passion for justice, my unwavering belief in the fundamental rights of every human being. My days were filled with meaning, my nights with a peaceful sleep that had eluded me for decades, no longer haunted by the ghost of hunger or the chilling whispers of disdain. The scars remained, etched into my soul, but they were no longer open wounds. They were reminders of a battle fought and won, symbols of resilience and the unwavering power of the human spirit. I was no longer the starving, invisible child. I was a woman of substance, of purpose, who had not just survived, but had triumphed, forging a legacy of compassion from the bitter ashes of cruelty. I often find myself standing by the window of my small, peaceful home, gazing out at the quiet street, the gentle breeze carrying the sweet scent of blooming jasmine. My reflection in the glass is no longer that of a fearful, hungry child, but of a woman who has weathered the most ferocious storms and emerged stronger, wiser, and profoundly at peace. My hair, now silver, glistens in the sunlight, each strand a testament to the passage of time, to the experiences that have shaped me, to the battles I have fought and won. There are no regrets, no lingering bitterness in my heart, only a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, for the hard-won lessons learned, for the truth that ultimately set me free. I often think of that small crumpled paper I pulled from my father's coat so many years ago, the one that revealed the devastating lie of my identity, the bitter secret of my existence. That single piece of paper, seemingly insignificant in its physical form, was the catalyst, the spark that ignited the long, arduous path to justice. It was a harsh revelation, a wound that festered for years, tearing open old hurts, but ultimately, it was the undeniable key to my liberation. It taught me a profound truth. That truth, no matter how painful, is always the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of the oppressed. It taught me that even in the deepest despair, when all hope seems lost, there is always a flicker of hope, a nascent strength waiting to be discovered within the human spirit. My life is no longer defined by the trauma of my past, by the cruelty I endured, but by the conscious choices I have made since, by the profound purpose I have found in helping others avoid the same fate. The gnawing hunger I once knew has been replaced by an abundance, not just of material comforts, but of emotional fulfillment, of genuine human connection. The suffocating silence I once endured has been replaced by a voice, a quiet but firm voice that advocates for the vulnerable, that whispers stories of resilience and hope, a voice that speaks truth to power. I sometimes visit the small, unassuming grave of Fatima, the cook, a woman whose silent acts of kindness were a lifeline in my darkest hours, a beacon of compassion in a world of cruelty. I leave a single fragrant rose on her tombstone, a silent promise that her compassion was not forgotten, that her small acts of defiance, her quiet humanity, helped shape the woman I ultimately became. She was a testament to the kindness that can exist even in the bleakest circumstances. My journey has been a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a testament to the fact that even when stripped of everything, when rendered invisible, unheard, and unwanted, one can still rise, reclaim their own narrative, and forge a legacy that transcends suffering, a legacy of hope and change. And so, as I look into the mirror each morning, I see not just an old woman, but a survivor, a fighter, a testament to the unwavering pursuit of justice. My story is a quiet warning to those who believe they can bury their secrets indefinitely, a testament to the unyielding power of truth, and a beacon of hope for anyone who feels unseen, unheard, or unjustly treated. Remember, dear friends, that the quietest whispers often carry the loudest truths. And sometimes the most profound acts of revenge are born not of fleeting anger, but of a relentless pursuit of justice, a quiet, unwavering resolve that can dismantle empires built on lies, brick by painful brick. Never ever underestimate the power of a single truth, for it can shatter a lifetime of deception and set the soul free. My journey, dear friends, from the shadows of neglect to the dawn of my own truth, is a testament to the quiet strength that resides within us all. If my story has resonated with you, if it has stirred something in your own heart, then I invite you to join this community. By subscribing to this channel, you're not just supporting me. You're becoming part of a space where stories of resilience, justice, and the unwavering human spirit find their voice. I have many more truths to share, many more journeys of courage to tell. Join me as we continue to explore the power of reclaiming our narratives,